Real quick.
Okay,
Yeah. Everybody, we're going to have a presentation from Tuck. He's going to tell us some stories about a Stinson, allegedly a better airplane than a rocket stand. But I don't know. We'll see what he has to say.
good morning, fellow pilots.
Good morning.
Usually they're in your hands.
Where to begin my flying story? Can you all hear me all right? All right. Like many of you, mine begins with memories of those returning from World War II. Okay. My four Army Air Corps uncles flew B-24s in Europe. Upon their return, I heard many stories, and they took me to airfields to see the planes they had flown. Their stories and sacrifices have stayed with me to this day. Fast forward to a 17-year-old high school dropout who lost his driver's license to a faster cop. So short of good options, I enlisted in 1956, joining the United States Army. So the recruiter asked me if I had any options. And I said, yes, I want to fly like my uncles did. He said, son, with your record, you're not going anywhere. But there is still one possibility. You could jump out of airplanes. I said, well, all right, if that's as close as I'm going to get, I'll take it. And the next thing I know, I was jumping out of airplanes with the 82nd Airborne Division. Fortunately, a fellow trooper had been a flight instructor in civilian life, offered to teach me in a 65 horsepower yellow J3 Cub. A great instructor. I eventually soloed from the back seat and was hooked. Many of you know that that's how you have to fly one of those J3s. So upon discharge in 59, I secured a private ticket in Hillsborough, and then with the help of the GI Bill, went on to earning a commercial, a multi-engine, and instrument ratings. But the capstone for me was a type certificate in a J3 Cub. I'm sorry, in a DC-3.
Slightly different.
Got to stay on your toes. Eventually, wanderlust led me to buy a Stinson station wagon. Pictured here, that's what it looked like in 1948. For those of you who can see it, that's as they were sold. And you'll notice it pictures a young lady flying this airplane in those days, all dressed to the nines. All right. So with this Stinson, I enhanced it with a 220 Franklin engine and a constant speed prop. Many trips, 5 north of the Arctic Circle, across northern Canada, down the east coast to the Caribbean, eventually to Mexico. What I discovered is a long trip is just a series of short trips, and you just link them together And the next thing you know, you're miles from home. So I followed friends eventually to Evergreen Field, including, of course, my friend Cliff Olson, Cliff Schrock, sorry, where I met Wally Olson, one of my heroes, and joined this organization there at Evergreen Field. To this day, I miss everything about the fly-ins I so enjoyed at Evergreen. How many of you flew out of Evergreen? Most of you here, yes. I hope those days would never end, but of course, like all good things, they did. I felt so compelled to fly one of Wally's favorite airplanes, his Waco. And after a long time of duel, he finally let me solo in his Waco, and that was a thrill. So soon, my 16-year-old son, who'd been tagging along, got the bug, and he soloed in a glider, and then Wally took him under his arm, and he flew Wally's Taylorcrafts and Arankas, and eventually started his career that he has today as a corporate pilot, flying jets and bush planes in Anchorage. So my close friend Jan, who's with me tonight this afternoon, also flew with Wally, and had some exciting long distance flights to places like Chehalis and to the south, Cottage Grove. That was just the beginning, of course. In time, she became my wife and co-pilot on many trips to the far north and Oshkosh and the East Coast. The dauntless story is captured in this video I'm about to share. From 67, after 55 years, I was bonded to this airplane, but time required it retire, and did so to the wonderful museum in Hood River, where you can see it for your own selves. It's marked Tuck Wilson's airplane right there at Evergreen. Having survived so long, the FAA finally awarded me the Wright Brothers Master Pilots Award. And now, how the Dauntless flies.
Stinson station wagon N918 Charlie rolled out of the Consolidated Vultee Aircraft Plant in Wayne, Michigan in November 1947. On December 1st, 1947, it was purchased by Western Skyways Service at the Portland Troutdale Airport. Shasta Cascade Flying Service of Klamath Falls bought 918 Charlie in February 1948. In August 1950, ownership was transferred to Cecil Drew of Klamath Falls. 11 years later, in April 1961, Patrick Shelp of Livermore, California, bought the maroon Stinson. 3 months later, it was back in Klamath Falls, this time in the ownership of Glenn Jolnick. Its next to last owner was Henry Brandt of Salem, who bought 918 Charlie in June 1964. In 1967, Henry put the plane up for sale at McNary Field in Salem, where Lyndon Arnold Smith, Jr., our friend Tuck, liked to take a break from his studies for the Oregon bar exam. The rest, as they say, is history.
In 1967, I was completing my legal education. I was studying for the bar in Salem, Oregon, and I was bored. I wanted to take the flight of my lifetime. I wanted to go to Alaska. So I looked around to rent an airplane, and nobody would rent an airplane to go to Alaska, and I couldn't understand quite why. So I saw an ad in a newspaper and said there was a Stinson for sale for $3,500. And I went down and looked at it, and it was love at first sight. So I bought this Stinson, and my sister and my wife, we piled in the Stinson and we headed north to Alaska in the summer of '67. And we had lots of adventures along the way, and we landed ultimately in Fairbanks, where the World's Fair was going on. It was raining at the time we arrived, but we thought the sun would come out sooner or later. However, within about 4 days' time, the Tina and the Chena rivers burst their banks, and the entire city of Fairbanks was flooded. 9 feet of water in downtown Fairbanks. We were evacuated to the University of Alaska on the hillside with 10,000 other people. Meanwhile, my airplane that I had just acquired, my pride and joy, was under 9 feet of water on Phelps Field. It was several weeks before I could return to find my plane. I tried to find some mechanics to go with me to fix the plane, but all of the mechanics were busy working for Alaskan pilots. I asked and I asked. Finally, somebody said there is one mechanic who lives in his hangar, and he may be drinking, but you can go talk to him. I found this old mechanic, in fact, sleeping off a hangover on a couch in his hangar where he lived. And I finally persuaded him to go with me to rescue my plane if he could take a case of beer with him. So off we went, toolbox and beer, back to Fairbanks with sleeping bags, tent, and we drove out to Phelps Field, where this plane was sitting in a slump and there was still water right up to its belly. So we had to roll it out of the water, let it drain, set up our tent, and we lived with the airplane for 2 weeks while we took off all the accessories from the engine, flushed the engine, and finally got it to fly after sending all the parts down to Anchorage to be repaired and then sent back to Fairbanks to be installed. Finally, the plane was ready to fly. I said to the mechanic, well, it's all ready to go. Let's fly back to Anchorage. He said, not on your life. I'm not going to fly back in that airplane. I'm taking the airliner. So by myself, I got in the plane. I still had water floating in the instruments. But I had the engine running, and it was a sunny day, and I made the trip by following the railroad from Fairbanks to Anchorage. Mount McKinley was out, and I knew that it meant that this was a good omen for this airplane, that McKinley was out. And finally, after another month of working on the plane in Anchorage, I was able to fly it back to Oregon. Upon landing in Oregon, I learned that I'd passed the bar exam that I'd taken earlier that summer. So it was a happy ending both for me and the plane. And from that time on, I named the plane the Dauntless. In 1980, there was an opportunity to put a larger engine in the plane, and I'd been studying that question for some time. And over in Vancouver, Washington, Pearson Field, there was a gentleman that was doing 220 conversions. And it's one of the distinguishing features of this airplane since that time that it has this larger engine with a constant speed prop that really made an enormous difference in its performance. It cruises 130 miles an hour, will get off the ground in no time at all, and is a smooth running engine and has been my pride and joy. The other distinguishing feature is this airplane has a full panel, so I can and do fly it on instruments. Both me and Channing got our instrument rating in this airplane, which is unusual for an airplane of this age. But with its panel of instruments and radios, we were able to do that. One of the distinguishing features has been the slotted wings. These slots keep the wind going over the ailerons at slow speed, giving excellent control of the plane. That's one of the reasons it was such a success as a bush plane. Clear prop.
You'll notice this is evergreen field. That's foot stock.
And that's that. Fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
On your instrument panel, what was the set of push button numbers on the left?
I think that was an old Loran system that I had before GPS. You know, people did fly before GPS. Great. I've enjoyed this very much. Thanks for the invitation.